My child, do not move past this moment too quickly. Something has shifted, and the person your heart keeps returning to has just experienced something they did not expect. There is a reason these words are reaching you now, in this exact moment, when your thoughts may have been wandering between hope and uncertainty. Stay here for a little while, because what happened was not loud enough for the whole world to notice, yet it was powerful enough to change the way your soulmate is looking at everything between you. They thought they understood their feelings. They thought they knew what they could control. They thought they had more time. But then one unexpected moment broke through all of those carefully built walls, and now there is something in their heart they can no longer push aside. For some time, your soulmate has been carrying two different versions of the same truth. One was the truth they showed to everyone else, the calm face, the ordinary routine, the appearance that everything was under control. The other truth lived in the private places where nobody could see them, in the quiet seconds after conversations ended, in the memories that returned without invitation, and in the questions they kept trying not to ask themselves. You have been present in that hidden truth more often than you realize. Even when they tried to focus elsewhere, something about you remained. A phrase you once said. The way you made them feel understood. A small moment that seemed insignificant at the time. The strange peace they felt when they imagined you beside them. These things were not disappearing. They were collecting, one by one, until the heart had more evidence than the mind could deny. And then something happened. It was not what they planned. It did not arrive in the form they expected. In fact, that is exactly why it affected them so deeply. Your soulmate had been moving through their day believing it would be ordinary, when suddenly a conversation, a memory, and a surprising realization collided at once. Someone said something that seemed simple on the surface, but it touched the one subject your soulmate had been carefully avoiding. Your name was not necessarily the first thing spoken, yet you became the first person they thought about. In that instant, the room around them seemed to become quieter. They heard the words, but behind those words they heard another question forming inside themselves. What if I have been looking at this the wrong way? That question stayed with them. They could not shake it. And what came next surprised even them. Your soulmate began remembering not the difficult moments, not the misunderstandings, not the distance, but the things they had almost forgotten because they were too meaningful to examine closely. They remembered how different their energy felt around you. They remembered a moment when you gave them kindness without demanding anything in return. They remembered how your presence once made something heavy inside them feel lighter. And suddenly, the story they had been telling themselves about you no longer felt complete. There was another side to it, one they had kept hidden because acknowledging it would require them to admit something much bigger. They still care more deeply than they have allowed themselves to say. This is where the unexpected part begins. Because the moment that shook them was not simply emotional. It caused them to make a choice they had been postponing. They opened something they had not looked at in a while. Perhaps it was an old conversation. Perhaps it was a photo, a note, a memory stored somewhere they rarely visit. Whatever form it took, they went back to something connected to you. And when they did not feel what they expected to feel. They expected distance. They expected the past to feel smaller. They expected to prove to themselves that time had changed everything. Instead, their hearts softened. There was a long pause. And then came the realization they were not prepared for. The feeling had changed, yes, but it had not disappeared. It had become quieter, deeper, and more difficult to dismiss. My child, this is why you must hear the next part carefully. This is not a promise that another person will suddenly appear at your door or that every unanswered question will resolve itself overnight. Love is not a command, and hearts are not machines. But within this story, something meaningful has changed in the emotional landscape surrounding this connection. Your soulmate has begun seeing you from a perspective they resisted before. They are no longer only thinking about what happened between you. They are thinking about what could still happen if both of you became more honest, more patient, and less afraid. And that realization has unsettled them. Not because it is bad. Because it is real. There are certain truths people can carry comfortably when they remain hypothetical. Maybe I care. Maybe I miss them. Maybe things could have been different. Those thoughts are easy to keep at a distance. But the moment a person realizes, would genuinely regret losing this forever, everything changes. That is the edge your soulmate has reached. Something unexpected forced them to imagine a future where you truly moved beyond their reach. Not temporarily. Not as part of some emotional game. Completely. And the feeling that rose inside them was stronger than they anticipated. They felt the absence before the absence had even fully happened. That is what frightened them into honesty. For a brief moment, they pictured your life continuing beautifully without waiting for them to decide what they wanted. They imagined someone else appreciating the things about you they had taken too long to understand. They imagined your laughter becoming part of somebody else's ordinary day. They imagined you no longer checking the emotional doorway behind you to see whether they were finally coming. And something inside them tightened, because they realized they had been assuming your heart would remain in the same place while they took all the time they needed. That assumption broke. And with it, another wall broke too. Your soulmate began asking themselves why they had been so hesitant. They thought about every excuse. Timing. Fear. Pride. Family expectations. Previous disappointments. The possibility of being hurt. The fear of choosing wrong. The fear of wanting something too much. Each explanation once felt powerful enough to justify their silence. But now, when placed beside the possibility of losing you, those reasons suddenly felt smaller. This does not mean their fears vanished. It means love finally became louder than some of them. There is a difference. And you must understand that difference, because the next movement in this story depends on it. Your soulmate is not suddenly becoming fearless. They are becoming tired of allowing fear to make every decision. That is what happened unexpectedly. The change was not outside of them first. It happened within. A shift from, I can keep avoiding this, to, I may need to face this before it is too late. Those two sentences may sound similar, but they belong to completely different emotional worlds. They are standing between those worlds now. And something else happened after that realization. They spoke about you. Not in the casual way they may have done before. Not with vague words designed to hide the depth of their feelings. This time, something slipped through. Someone close enough to notice their expression asked a question, and instead of immediately shutting down, your soulmate hesitated. That hesitation revealed more than they intended. The person across from them noticed it. They asked another question. Your soulmate tried to laugh it away, but the truth had already entered the room. Then came the sentence that changed the atmosphere. Your soulmate admitted that they still think about you. It was not a dramatic confession. There were no crowds, no music, no perfect cinematic setting. It was quieter than that, which made it even more important. Because people can perform grand gestures when emotions are temporary, but quiet admissions often happen when the truth has become too heavy to carry alone. The person listening did not react the way your soulmate expected. They did not immediately tell them to move on. They did not make fun of the feeling. They did not dismiss the connection. Instead, they asked something your soulmate had been avoiding asking themselves: then why are you still pretending this means nothing? Those words stayed in the air. Your soulmate had no quick answer. And that silence told them everything. For the first time, they heard their own confusion reflected back at them through someone else's eyes. They realized that what they called uncertainty might actually be fear wearing a more respectable name. They realized that what they called needing time might partly be the habit of postponing vulnerability. They realized that protecting themselves from every possible disappointment had also been protecting them from the possibility of something beautiful. This is where heaven, in this fictional story, would whisper, "Pay attention to the spaces where your fear has been pretending to be wisdom." Because your soulmate just did. And now their thoughts are moving faster than before. They are replaying moments they once misunderstood. They are questioning conclusions they reached when emotions were high. They are remembering the tenderness beneath the confusion. And perhaps most unexpectedly, they are beginning to recognize something about you that they did not fully appreciate before. You were not asking them to be perfect. You were asking them to be present. That difference has touched them deeply. They once thought they needed to solve everything before approaching you. They thought they needed perfect clarity, perfect timing, perfect courage. But what happened recently showed them that perfection may never arrive. Life keeps moving. People change. Opportunities close. Hearts heal and eventually stop waiting. And suddenly, the idea of waiting for the perfect moment feels more dangerous than speaking imperfectly from the truth. This realization has created a new question inside them. Should they reach out? They have considered it before, but this time feels different. Before, the thought of reaching out was usually followed by 100 reasons not to. What if they ignore me? What if they have changed? What if I say the wrong thing? What if I reopen something that should stay closed? But now another question has appeared, and it is stronger than the rest. What if I never say anything and regret it? That question is keeping them awake emotionally. They are not necessarily rushing. In fact, part of them is still trying to slow everything down. They are measuring words before speaking them. They are imagining possible reactions. They are wondering whether you would even believe them if they finally became honest. They know that feelings alone are not enough. They know trust requires consistency. They know you deserve more than confusing signals. And that awareness is important, because it is forcing them to think beyond a temporary burst of emotion. They are beginning to consider what they would actually need to change. Not merely what they would need to say. That is the deeper shift. Your soulmate knows there were moments when silence hurt you. They know there may have been times you questioned whether the connection mattered at all. They know that if they step toward you again, they cannot expect you to forget every difficult moment just because they finally found the courage to speak. Something in them is maturing around that truth. They are starting to understand that love is not proven by intensity alone. It is proven by how carefully someone handles the heart that trusts them. And here is another unexpected part. Someone close to your soulmate may have noticed this change before they did. There has been a difference in the way they respond when your name or the subject of love appears. Their expression changes. Their attention sharpens. They become quieter. Sometimes people around us recognize our truth by watching what our face does before we can hide it. That is what happened here. Someone saw the softness. Someone saw the conflict. Someone saw that despite everything your soulmate tried to say, this story was still alive inside them. That person offered advice. But the advice was not what your soulmate expected. They said, in essence, that if something real remains, it deserves honesty, not obsession, not chasing, not pressure, but honesty. That distinction struck them. Because your soulmate does not want to force you. They want to know whether a door still exists. And this is where your energy in the story becomes important too. You are not being asked to stop your life. You are not being asked to wait by the window for somebody else's decision. The strongest position you can hold is not anxious expectation. It is grounded self-respect. Let what is genuine approach you with clarity. Let what is uncertain become responsible for finding its own courage. You do not need to shrink your life to make another person comfortable enough to choose you. Your soulmate is beginning to realize this as well. They can sense, perhaps without fully knowing why, that something about you has changed. Maybe you have become more peaceful. Maybe less available to confusion. Maybe more willing to let life unfold without forcing a specific outcome. This has changed the emotional balance between you. When one person stops carrying the entire weight of a connection, the other person suddenly feels what they were not carrying. Your soulmate is feeling that weight now. And something about it is waking them up. They are remembering how often you were the one who understood, waited, forgave, explained, or tried to see beneath their behavior. They are beginning to wonder whether they ever made you feel equally safe. That question is uncomfortable, but it is necessary. Because love cannot remain a beautiful idea while one heart does all the emotional labor. The unexpected event has become a mirror. Your soulmate is looking into it. And they do not completely recognize the version of themselves they see. They see where pride spoke for them. They see where fear delayed them. They see where assumptions replaced conversations. They see where they expected you to understand things they never properly communicated. This realization could have made them defensive. Instead, something surprising happened. They felt remorse. Not shame that destroys. Remorse that awakens. The kind that says, I wish I had handled that differently, but perhaps I can become different now. And that thought has become the beginning of something. My child, perhaps you have wondered whether the silence meant you were forgotten. In this fictional spiritual message, the answer is more complicated and more meaningful than a simple yes or no. Silence does not always mean absence of feeling. Sometimes it means a person does not yet know how to hold what they feel. But silence also cannot become an excuse forever. Eventually, love has to become visible through honesty, respect, and action. Your soulmate has reached the point where they are beginning to understand that. They know they cannot simply feel something and expect you to magically know it. They know you cannot build a future from hints. They know you cannot heal from confusion with more confusion. So now they are thinking about words. Real words. Not vague messages. Not testing your reaction. Not pretending the conversation is casual when it is not. They are imagining what it would feel like to tell you something they have never fully admitted. And the sentence forming inside them is more vulnerable than anything they have said before. They want to tell you that you mattered even during the moments when they acted distant. They want to tell you that some of their hesitation was never about a lack of feeling. They want to tell you they were afraid of how deeply this could change their life. But there is still one thing stopping them. One final fear. And it is not the fear you might expect. They are not most afraid that you will reject them. They are afraid that when they finally tell you everything, you will calmly look at them and say, I needed to hear this a long time ago. Because that would force them to face the cost of every moment they waited. That possibility is heavy. Yet even that may not stop them now. Something happened after the conversation with the person close to them. Your soulmate was left alone with their thoughts, and instead of distracting themselves, they allowed the silence to remain. They sat with the truth. They remembered you. They remembered what they almost lost. Then, almost without thinking, they reached for their phone. Their hand paused. They opened the place where your name could still be found. For several seconds, they simply stared. Their heart raced, because this was no longer imagination. This was a choice. They began typing. Then stopped. Deleted it. Started again. The second message was different. More honest. Less guarded. But before they could finish, something appeared on the screen, something they did not expect to see. And the instant your soulmate saw it, their entire expression changed. Because whatever they had been planning to tell you suddenly became connected to a truth they had not known until that exact moment. They read it once. Then again. And when they understood what it meant, the words they had been preparing were no longer enough. Because now they knew there was one more thing they had to tell you first. Something changed in that instant, and your soulmate knew they could no longer send the message they had been writing. The words on the screen had touched the exact place in their heart they had been trying to protect. For a moment, they simply sat there, staring, almost unable to believe how perfectly this unexpected discovery had arrived. They had been preparing to tell you one truth, but now another truth had stepped in front of it, demanding to be acknowledged first. Their fingers became still. Their thoughts became louder. And somewhere beneath the confusion, they felt something they had not felt about this connection in a very long time: clarity. What appeared before them was not some frightening secret or terrible revelation. It was something far more emotionally powerful because it made them see the past differently. Something reminded them of a moment when you had quietly shown how much you cared, a moment they had misunderstood when it happened. Perhaps it was a forgotten message, an old photograph, a saved conversation, or something connected to a memory they thought they had already processed. The form mattered less than what it awakened. Suddenly, they understood that one of the moments they had interpreted as distance from you may actually have been you protecting your own heart. They had spent so long wondering why you changed, why your energy became quieter, why you stopped reaching in the same way. Now a possibility entered their mind that they had resisted before: perhaps you had not stopped caring. Perhaps you had simply become tired of carrying something alone. That realization landed deeply. They began retracing the story between you from a completely different perspective. Moments they had once viewed only through their own fears suddenly looked different. They remembered times when you waited for an answer and received uncertainty. They remembered moments when you tried to understand them while they remained difficult to read. They remembered the little ways you offered reassurance even when you needed reassurance yourself. And the more they remembered, the more uncomfortable one truth became: you may have been giving them opportunities to meet you halfway, and they did not recognize those opportunities until the distance became real. Your soulmate leaned back and closed their eyes. They did not want to admit this. But they could no longer escape it. They missed more than your presence. They missed who they were when the connection between you felt open and alive. There was something about being understood by you that allowed a softer version of them to exist. They had mistaken that softness for vulnerability, and vulnerability had frightened them. So they protected themselves. They became harder to read. They delayed conversations. They waited for certainty that could never arrive while they remained emotionally hidden. Now they were seeing the contradiction. They wanted proof that you cared while making it increasingly difficult for you to show that care safely. And this realization changed the message they were preparing. The first message had been cautious. It contained safe words. Words that could be explained away if you responded coldly. Something ordinary enough to protect their pride. Perhaps a simple question. Perhaps a casual greeting. Perhaps an innocent reason to reopen communication without admitting why they truly wanted to speak. They looked at those words again. Then deleted them. Because suddenly they understood that if they approached you wearing the same emotional armor that created the distance, nothing meaningful would change. This time, they wanted truth. But truth required courage. And courage required them to accept that they could not control your response. That was the hardest part. They could tell you what they felt, but they could not demand that you feel the same. They could apologize, but they could not demand immediate forgiveness. They could explain their silence, but they could not erase what the silence may have done to you. For perhaps the first time, they began understanding that genuine love is not about controlling the ending. Sometimes it is simply about becoming honest enough to give another heart the truth it deserved all along. And something in them became calmer when they accepted that. They began typing again. This time, slowly. The first sentence was different. It was not dramatic. It was not perfect. But it was real. They wrote something that acknowledged they had been thinking about you. Then they stopped. Their thumb hovered over the screen. A familiar fear rose immediately. What if this changes everything? But another thought answered it. What if everything has already changed? That thought became impossible to ignore. Because the unexpected event had already changed something inside them. Whether they contacted you tonight, tomorrow, or later, they could no longer return completely to the emotional position they occupied before. Once a person sees the truth clearly, pretending becomes exhausting. Your soulmate had seen enough to know that the connection could no longer be stored safely in the category of something from the past. There was unfinished truth here. And unfinished truth has a way of returning. Not always because two people are destined to reunite, but because human hearts seek understanding. They seek completion. They seek the courage to say what fear once interrupted. And within this story, your soulmate is standing at that threshold now. But there is another layer. Someone else noticed what was happening. The person who had spoken with your soulmate earlier had sensed the shift. They could tell your soulmate was no longer merely reminiscing. Something more serious was happening. So they asked a question that made your soulmate freeze. If they were standing in front of you right now, what would you actually tell them? Your soulmate looked away. At first, they had no answer. Then several answers came at once. They would tell you they were sorry for every moment their silence made you question your worth. They would tell you that some of their distance came from fear, not indifference. They would tell you there were nights when they almost reached out. They would tell you they wondered whether you still thought about them. They would tell you they remembered details about you that they pretended to forget. But beneath all of those truths was another sentence. A sentence they had never said aloud. They whispered it so quietly that the person beside them almost did not hear. I think I was afraid because it mattered too much. The room became silent. Your soulmate heard their own words and immediately understood how much truth was inside them. They had always believed fear appeared when something was wrong. But sometimes fear appears because something matters. The possibility of losing something meaningless does not keep a person awake. The possibility of being deeply known does. The possibility of giving another human being access to the parts of yourself you normally protect does. And your soulmate suddenly realized that some of the intensity they had interpreted as a warning may actually have been the emotional weight of genuine vulnerability. But this realization did not magically excuse everything. And they knew that. That is what made the moment different. They were not trying to rewrite the past so they could become innocent in every chapter. They were finally willing to admit where they had contributed to the confusion. That is a much deeper transformation than simply missing someone. Missing you could have remained nostalgia. Taking responsibility meant something inside them was growing. And that growth led them toward another realization. They began thinking about you not as someone waiting for them, but as someone with choices of your own. That changed everything. Because somewhere inside their imagination, they had unconsciously frozen you in time. They imagined your feelings remaining exactly where they had left them. They imagined that if they ever became ready, the door would naturally still be open. Now they understood how unfair that assumption was. You have been living too. You have been changing. You have been learning what you deserve. You may have been healing wounds they never saw. You may have been rebuilding confidence in places where uncertainty once weakened it. And perhaps, most importantly, you may have discovered that peace is valuable enough that you no longer want to trade it for mixed signals. Your soulmate felt that possibility strongly. It did not make them want to manipulate you into staying. It made them realize that if they approached you, they would need to bring something better than promises. They would need consistency. That word remained in their mind. Consistency. Because grand declarations can be beautiful, but love is often revealed through smaller things, answering when you say you will answer, showing up when you say you will show up, speaking honestly when silence would be easier, listening without becoming defensive, remembering that another person's heart is not a place to enter and leave carelessly. Your soulmate began understanding this. And something extraordinary happened in the emotional atmosphere of the story. The urgency they felt began transforming into intention. There is a difference between rushing towards someone because you are afraid of losing them and approaching them because you have finally understood how you want to love them. Fear says, I need them back immediately. Love says, if I enter their life again, I want to enter differently. Your soulmate was beginning to hear the second voice. And that voice asked them a difficult question. What exactly would be different this time? They could not answer immediately. So they started thinking. They thought about communication. They thought about patience. They thought about honesty. They thought about the boundaries you might now have. They imagined hearing things from you that might be uncomfortable, and instead of preparing arguments, they imagined listening. This surprised them. Because before, they often prepared to defend themselves. Now they were preparing to understand. That small internal change was more important than any dramatic confession. But the night was not finished revealing things. There was still the unexpected discovery on the screen. Your soulmate returned to it. They examined it more carefully. And now another detail stood out. Something they had overlooked the first time. A date. A phrase. A small connection between two moments. Their heartbeat quickened again. Because they suddenly realized that something you had done long ago happened at almost exactly the same time they themselves had been struggling privately with thoughts of you. Neither of you had known what was happening inside the other. Two people had been carrying different pieces of the same emotional story without communicating them. Your soulmate stared at the timing. It felt almost impossible. Within this cinematic spiritual story, it was the kind of coincidence that makes a person sit quietly and wonder whether some connections leave echoes even when two people are apart. They remembered that period clearly. They had been trying to convince themselves to move forward. Yet you appeared constantly in their thoughts. They would hear a song and remember you. Walk somewhere and imagine what you would say. See something funny and instinctively think about sending it to you before remembering the distance. They had told themselves these were random memories. But now they were discovering that during that same period, something connected to you had been quietly preserving evidence that the story was more complicated than either of you realized. Your soulmate felt tears gathering. Not because they were devastated. Because suddenly they understood how much had remained unsaid. How did we let this become so complicated, they wondered. And for once, they did not blame you. They did not blame circumstances. They simply acknowledged the sadness of two hearts having feelings they did not know how to communicate. This is where the divine voice in this fictional message would remind you of something important. Not every missed moment is proof that love failed. Sometimes it is proof that people still had growing to do. But growth does not guarantee reunion, and reunion should never require abandoning wisdom. If someone returns, let their actions reveal whether their transformation is real. Your heart deserves both tenderness and discernment. You can love deeply without ignoring what you have learned. You can forgive without surrendering boundaries. You can hear someone's truth without immediately promising them your future. And perhaps this is exactly what your soulmate is beginning to understand. They do not want you to choose them because you feel pressured. They want the opportunity to show you who they are becoming. That is a different desire. And it frightened them because showing you would take time. Words could happen tonight. Proof would take longer. They knew that. Then came another moment they did not expect. Their phone moved in their hand. The unfinished message was still there. They read it from beginning to end. It said enough to reopen the door. But not enough to tell the whole truth. Your soulmate almost pressed send. Almost. Then something stopped them again. This time it was not fear. It was a realization. They did not want their first honest conversation with you to begin with half the truth. There was something else you deserved to know. Something connected to why they pulled away in the first place. Until now, they had convinced themselves that telling you would only complicate things. They thought silence was protecting both of you. But now they could see that silence had created its own complications. So they opened the message again. They added another sentence. Then another. Their hands trembled slightly. Because they were approaching the part they had never told anyone completely. Even the person sitting near them did not know all of it. There had been a moment in the past, one particular moment, when your soulmate had been closer to choosing you openly than you ever realized. They had made a decision. A real decision. They were going to tell you. They had even prepared themselves emotionally. But before they could do it, something happened. Someone said something. A piece of information reached them. And because they were already afraid, they believed it without asking you directly. That information changed their behavior toward you. It created doubt. It made them hesitate. And for a long time, they thought they had made the right choice by stepping back. Until now. Because the unexpected thing they had just discovered on their screen proved that the information they received back then may not have been true. Your soulmate sat completely still. They returned to the old memory. They remembered who told them. They remembered the exact conversation. They remembered how quickly their heart sank. And suddenly they saw what they had never seen before. They never actually verified it with you. They assumed. They reacted. They withdrew. And you may never have known why. Their breathing changed. The person beside them noticed. "What is it?" they asked. Your soulmate did not answer immediately. They were staring at the screen as the pieces came together. The timing. The words. The old conversation. Your behavior afterward. Their behavior afterward. It all looked different now. And with every connection they made, one possibility became stronger. Someone may have misunderstood something about you, or passed along something incomplete, and your soulmate allowed that misunderstanding to influence one of the most important emotional decisions they ever made. They felt regret rise instantly. But then another emotion followed. Determination. Because this time, they did not want to build another conclusion from assumptions. They wanted to know the truth from you. Directly. No intermediaries. No guessing. No reading between lines that were never spoken. Just truth. Your soulmate looked again at the message they had written. They erased almost all of it. Then they began one final time. The new message did not pretend everything was normal. It did not hide behind small talk. It did not demand anything. It began with an admission. There was something they should have asked you a long time ago. Something they had been afraid to ask because they were afraid of the answer. And now they finally wanted to hear your side. Their finger moved toward send. But just before touching the screen, another notification appeared. This one came from the very person connected to that old misunderstanding. Your soulmate froze. They had not spoken to this person about you in a long time. Yet somehow, on the exact night your soulmate had begun questioning what really happened, this person had reached out. The message contained only a few words. But those words made your soulmate sit upright. Because the person was asking to speak privately. About you. Your soulmate stared at the notification, feeling their heartbeat grow louder. They opened it. Another message arrived immediately. Then another. And with the third message came a sentence your soulmate had waited far too long to hear. The person admitted there was something about the past they had never explained correctly. Your soulmate's face changed. Their unfinished message to you remained open beneath the notification. For several seconds, they did nothing. Then they typed one question to the person who had just contacted them. A simple question. What really happened? The typing indicator appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Whoever was on the other side seemed to be struggling with what to say. Your soulmate waited. 10 seconds felt like a minute. Then the reply finally arrived. They opened it. Read the first line. And everything they believed about the reason you two drifted apart began to collapse. Because the message started with words your soulmate never expected to see. I need to tell you the truth about what I said about them.